Happy Friday, everybody. Back with the fourth installment of the Foxhole. Are we populating participants? Yep. People are coming in. Let a couple more minutes go, or another minute go by, and then we'll jump in. Thank you, everyone, for coming on with us again this Friday. We have a few really special guests again. I'm feeling very fortunate about that. Again, some of our better friends in the coffee industry. It's really cool. All right.
And a mascot.
And a puppy. And a birdie.
Birdie, what's up?
All right. Should we get going, Zach?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it. It's 11:03. All right. Welcome, everyone. Happy to have you again on the Foxhole. I'm Aleko Shigonis, co-founder of Red Fox Coffee Merchants, your host, along with Zach Fritzhand, live from Vermont, and Joel Edwards. This week, our main man in the quality department, live from Oaxaca, still in Mexico. And we have a few really great guests. David Pohl from 49th Parallel, an old bud. Welcome, David. Jamie Smith from Tartine Manufactory, Cafe Tartine. And Jen Apodaca from Mother Tongue on also the Pulley Collective. Really stoked to have all three of you on to tell some roasting stories this week.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, welcome. Before we jump into those stories, let's do a little intro from yourselves about what you're up to and what you're doing. And if you want to plug something, that'd be great. Jamie, you want to jump in?
Sure. So currently I'm the director of coffee at Coffee Manufactory. So kind of have my hand in every pot all the time, from, roasting, sample roasting, green buying, the whole shebang. I've been with Coffee Manufactory kind of since the beginning. I joined the company like less than a year after they started. So it's been about 3 years now. But yeah, in terms of like plugging, for us right now, we're actually doing a 1-for-1 match. So if you navigate to our website, every bag that we sell, we donate a bag in return to frontline workers. And that's not exclusive to healthcare. It's also grocery stores and pharmacies and, anybody who's out there who needs coffee, we're trying our best to supply it to them. I think that's kind of like the least we can do right now. But yeah, that's like our big thing that we're working on. Last week we raised enough to donate a little over 200 pounds. So also if you have anybody you think that you could use some coffee, feel free to reach out to us on our Instagram. We've got plenty to go around at this point, so.
Great. Very
Rad.
cool. Jen, how about you?
All right. Hey, I'm Jen Apodaca. I started my own roasting business, it's about a year ago, and called Mother Tongue Coffee. And before that, I worked for lots of different roasting companies. And I also work for Pulley Collective out of West Oakland, and we are still up and running. We're trying to keep this place open for folks to keep, roasting as much as they can. Most of our members have seen some pretty big downturns. Maybe they're roasting every 2 weeks instead of every week, and a lot of them have lost a lot of customers, but are just really trying to keep it going. So these days I spend my time trying to keep this place open, but then also trying to keep Mother Tongue going as well. Like Jamie, we also have like a donation. I have friends. I grew up in the Bay Area, and my friends work for different hospitals, and they're all collecting meals and coffee, whatever they can. So this week I donated about 50 pounds of coffee, just what I had left over from this week. And I put a donate button on my website. So if you want to pitch in, you want to buy some coffee for someone at San Francisco General or at Alta Bates in Oakland, and I have another contact that's coming through in San Leandro, Kaiser. So yeah, please do. I mean, it takes all of us, I guess. Yeah. And then Yeah, that's it.
What's the website, Jen?
Oh, mothertonguecoffee.com. And it's just in the web shop. You can donate $3. You can donate $50. It's whatever you feel comfortable doing.
Really great. Thanks for doing that.
Yeah.
Sweet. Shall we jump in with stories? And by the way, folks in the audience, if you have questions, feel free to jump in. We'll get to them after the stories, but we'd love to hear from you all too. Who wants to be the first victim?
Oh no. Jen, huh?
I mean,
Okay.
mine's lame, so maybe I should start, right?
Sure.
I had a really hard time trying to think of something, you know, like honestly, like the best I could think. I mean, I know that there's lots of like really self-deprecating moments in roasting throughout my 17 years of doing it, but like the worst I could think of, I mean, the worst, maybe not the worst, but the one that I felt that I could share is just how many times, like how long it took me to learn to like, you know, go to the bathroom before starting my shift, and how many times I've almost shit my pants being in the morning. And it even kind of, I kind of have a reputation as a roasting manager of telling people that if it's between a roaster fire and them shitting their pants, that they are going to shit their pants.
Solid advice.
And if that means they need to, you know, bring in a pair of extra underwear and pants, so be it, you know? You got to sacrifice one for the team.
The first episode of the Foxhole was almost entirely poop stories, but we felt like that would be not the most ideal place to start. But luckily, the last 2 weeks, we veered right back on course.
It was traveling, right?
Yeah.
3 travel poop stories. Yep, that's right.
We've all been there. We've all experienced it.
Yeah.
We're all humans.
Yeah.
Right.
We are indeed.
Jen, I'd love to learn maybe a little bit about the roasting systems that you have experience working on.
Oh, me? All the roasting systems? I've roasted on like almost everything, I think now. In fact, here at Pulley, there's a DJ IR12 that I roasted on back when I got hired at Echo Cafe in 2010. That made its way to like New York and then back to Oakland, and that machine's like in-house right now in this warehouse. But,
Sorry, where were you roasting on that in New York?
oh no, I roasted on it in Echo Cafe in Santa Rosa, right?
Of course.
Back when like, Echo and Intelli merged or was purchased by Intelligentsia, and then that machine was sold to Steve Mirish at Pulley Collective and was hooked up in New York, and now it's back here in Oakland, and I'm here.
That's cool.
And then there's another.
It was meant to be.
I know the machines, they follow you, I think, because.
So you've roasted on that piece of equipment in 3 different locations?
In two
different locations.
I didn't get to roast on it in New York.
Huh.
But then there's like.
Pretty awesome.
There's the UG22 that Intelligentsia had refurbished by Steve Cardini. That's up on Mariposa Street. Back when Intelli went from Santa Rosa to San Francisco, and I roasted on that machine for about a year. And then that machine now has, that machine now is owned by Linea, who is Andrew Barnett, who owns Echo Cafe, right? Because everything's so incestuous, I guess. Every coffee is so small. And then
It is.
yeah, and then so like my former buddy went on vacation, and Linea needed somebody to come in and roast some coffee, so I went there because I know how to roast on that machine, and I know how to roast the coffees that Andrew likes anyway. So I got to re-roast on that machine in the same location but a different company.
Full circle.
For real.
That's awesome.
What did you roast on at McMiniman's back in the day?
Oh God. I roasted on an L5 that actually started its life as an electric 5 kilo Probot. And so there was this like falling apart like coil bed that was kind of shaped like this that would go under the drum that was removed, and they put gas instead.
Oh,
But I roasted on the L5 and I roasted on the L12. And I would roast on them at the same time, well, with my back turned, while I was bagging up coffee. And I didn't time anything. I overloaded my machines all the time because I didn't know any better, because I was told to overload them. And then they both were connected to the same afterburner, which was too small for even the 5 kilo machine. So if I only had to roast on one of the machines, I'd have to turn both of them on, or else like smoke exhaust would come out of the other one.
yeah.
It was crazy.
That's wild.
Wow.
Yeah, it was insane. It was
I've got
dangerous.
a UG22 story as well.
Go for it.
Piggybacking on that train of thought. I've also got a mascot. Decided to get her.
I appreciate all the dogs on this call.
Yeah,
Mine is
but I feel left out now.
Yeah. This is Lucy, and she likes to come to work with me and hang out in the office, but she was out in the front room. So I just picked her up and brought her in. But I learned how to roast on a UG22 way back in the day. This would have been 2003. And this was a UG22 at Uncommon Grounds. Anybody remember that?
Of course.
Old outfit. Yeah. And I was desperate to learn how to roast, and they hired me as a roaster trainer back in 2003, and had a circa 1940s, early 1950s UG22 with tape all over it, ductwork that had holes in it. I mean, we had smoke everywhere coming out of that machine. It was an awesome machine to learn how to roast on, however, and I absolutely love that machine. But the story is learning to roast on that machine. I roasted with a guy, and I don't know if any of you ever knew, his name was James Spahn, but he was the roaster there and then ended up doing other stuff. And I really came on the tail end of that company. That company was, it started in early 80s, all the East Bay beatniks and poets and drug addicts, they would hang out over there in West Berkeley. A lot of drug dealing happening, in the parking lot there. And they would still come in. They would still come into the roastery when I was there, and into the cafe as well, and hang out. But by then they were they were getting on in years, tattoo artists and poets and that sort of thing. But I got this job there, and James was my mentor. James is a big guy, goatee, always had tobacco in his lip, always spitting tobacco into a bottle or a can. If you can imagine James, Land Cruiser guy, so had a cruiser club that he went to every week, drove a Land Cruiser. And, here I am, this, young guy learning how to roast, and on a UG22, belching smoke on 7th Street in Berkeley. And James would stand behind me, and I didn't know anything about roasting, and probably shouldn't have been on that roaster, but there I was, and he would stand behind me, and this coffee would go through the first crack, into the second crack, and I just remember I'd turn around and say, "Can I open the door now? Can I drop this roast out?" And he'd look at me, and he would shake his head, kind of menacingly, saying, "Do not drop it out." And I'm sweating, getting more and more nervous, and I'd look back at him, and he'd start yelling, "Burn it! Burn the coffee! Burn it!" And literally, I mean, this is 80s coffee, right? And so burning the coffee was a good thing. The Berkeley blend, the Shea blend, that was another one. Those coffees were fried. And so I was sitting there learning how to roast and burning it with James Spahn. And yeah, I love that guy, and I really appreciate him, and always go back in my head to his approach, not the yelling, not the burning it, but the fact that he was all about experiential learning. So, this is yakking on something there. And he was all about, you got to roast, you know? So speaking of shitting your pants, it was like, there were no breaks. There were no breaks. And it was just all about, you got to roast 8-10 hours a day to learn how to do this. So I came in as an apprentice roaster, and that was it. Just roasting all day long, just me. I came in, I was roasting 8-10 hours a day. I did that for a year, and that's about as long as I lasted. Then I went over to Equator. But anyways, that's my UG22 James Spahn burn it story.
That just solidifies the thought to me that dark roasting is actually an attitude. You know, nothing else.
That is true.
Attitude.
That
It's
is
more than a
absolutely
mantra.
true.
It's more than an approach. Yeah.
Yep. And later on,
really
I've got a
funny.
Steve Pardini story as well. That's a very good one, but I'll save that for later.
Ooh, those are good.
Yeah.
Well, I've never shit my pants roasting, so got that going for me. I guess. I am a habitual planner though, and I like my routine. So some call it OCD. I have now learned it's a blessing. But my story involves a UG22 and throwing myself under the bus, and apologies to my former bosses if they're watching. But I started roasting. Actually, Joel was one of the folks who taught me how to roast at Ritual many, many moons ago. And I've been lucky enough to roast on a lot of UG22s. I've had a fire on a couple UG22s. But this particular, like when I was trying to think about like the funniest thing that's ever happened to me, I think the culmination of this one was the best one. Anyways, I had the night before a band that I like absolutely love, they're called Sleep, was playing in Santa Cruz. They hadn't played a show in like a decade, and there was like no way in hell I was gonna miss it. And I'd originally had I used to start where I was roasting at Sight Glass before at like 4 a.m. And so I had switched with our PM roaster, and he bailed. And I was like, I've had tickets for this for so long. I was like so stoked for it. And I was like, you know, like, fuck it. I'm 24 or however old I was at the time. I could do this. You know, I go to school full time, I work full time. I could roast coffee, sleepless and hungover. And so drove down to Santa Cruz and was like a little bit more excited than I should have been, and enhanced the show, if you catch my drift, a little too much, and slept in, which is another funny part of the story. I went down with my friend Bo, who has like a big van. He's a big van guy, and it was one of his first vans, and I slept in the van overnight. And I slept in this like really grimy, like American flag sleeping bag that he had. And I found out after the fact that it was my husband. Before I'd ever met him, I'd slept in a sleeping bag, which was very weird. And I thought he was gross. I was like, this thing stinks, but I have to get some sleep. So I was able to, because it was a small day, like push my shift to like 7. Like my boss was like, okay, we can make this work. It's a really tiny day. I was like, great, you're the best. So we drove from Santa Cruz, bless all my friends, at like 5 a.m. And they literally like pulled up, like dazed and confused, and like opened the van door and like kicked me out.
Wrapping up on the front steps.
And then I had to start roasting. And for some reason, the cafe, I mean, you know, Sight Glasses was open to the public. So, you know, people would come in and take pictures all the time, which, you know, if you were hungover, having a bad day, it was pretty rough. You know, but that day I was like, kind of like, I was proud of myself that I'd made it that far. And I was like, okay, it's all good. There's 10 tourists in here. No big deal. Dropped my first batch, flawless, nailed the curve. Everything was great. Second batch, I started to like really settle into what I had done to my body, and that I was going to be at work roasting for 8 straight hours. And I didn't have any relief that day. And I kind of started to panic a little bit. And on the outside of our cooling tray, we would put whatever we were roasting, we would like hook it on the outside. So like customers can see what we are roasting, and also for us when we drug it over to production. And I just dropped a batch into a brute, and I had the door open, and the tag had fallen into the bean bin. So I reached to grab it, but I reached through the cooling tray instead of the outside while the was on. And at the time, our brush was really old. So it was just like, beep, just looked like insane. It looked like a torture device. And it came around and just and pinned my arm, and it was just stabbing me over and over again. And I looked up, and there was like 30 people watching me, and 10 of which were taking my photo. And I was actively bleeding. I didn't want to pull my arm out because it would scrape it all. So I was just like basically in the cooling tray doing this. Beep, beep.
Oh my God.
And I'm looking at production, and like we're in the same building, so we were used to like making, funny faces at each other, or like sneaking the bird or something. And I kept going like, and I like didn't want to yell like, my arm is stuck in the fucking roaster. Because I also couldn't reach it because I was facing this way. So I couldn't like push it to stop. There was like nothing I could do. I was in like the most precarious like position, and I'm also like very small, and I have like T-Rex arms, so I can't reach anything. So for literally like 2 straight minutes, and they just were like laughing at me and thought I was being weird. And then like the customers were like giggling, like, and I was like, and finally somebody looked from upstairs down at me, and I was like, please help me. And they came downstairs, and I had to like instruct very quietly of like how to stop it, like hit this button. We're all good to go, like pull this lever, and pull my arm out. And it was like aggressively bleeding, and I just had to like, and I was like, have a great day, please throw away this coffee.
Oh my God.
It was so bad. It was really funny afterwards, but while it was happening, it was mortifying. But I actually worked with.
Did you need stitches or anything?
No, I just looked like I can't even explain it. I just had like this like series of like little dots like all over my arm for a little bit, and they totally went away. But
yeah,
I didn't come to work hungover again for a very, 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 very long time.
Yeah.
Sober you up real quick.
Yeah. I really nailed the rest of the day, though.
That's a good story.
One-handed.
One-handed.
The rest of it.
And she still finished her shift, right? Oh my God.
Still made it through.
Wow.
We didn't have any like bandages. Also, just so to add to how embarrassing this was, I just started roasting there like 2 months before. So I was already the new kid trying to prove myself. Thankfully, everybody just laughed at me. It was fine. But a couple of days before that, I was trying to fix something in the roastery with quick super glue, and it exploded, and it glued my fingers together. And so like on my second day, and it like glued my pants to my leg. And so we had to go like, it was like a really rough couple months for me, but I had to like rub like acetone to like stick it was awful. Bless them for keeping me for as long as I was there.
Too good.
Oh
Too good.
Man.
Glad you can find humor in that. I mean, that's terrifying.
It is.
Oh yeah, it could have been a lot worse. I mean, I definitely know people who've been more severely injured. But yeah, it's funny. It's funny now. All those things are funny afterwards, right?
Yeah. Yeah, you still have your arm, so that's
Yeah.
Still here.
the key
This
thing, right? It's right there. It's looking good. Looking
Thank
good.
you.
That sounds terrifying, though. Especially the idea of the crowd watching you. It's just like, kunk, kunk, kunk.
And they just like, I'll never get like just the glee, just like roasting is so cool. This is amazing. I'm like, yeah, it's so cool.
Yeah. Yeah. So one other story I have along those lines, back to Uncommon Grounds. A lot of good stories there happened in 12 months. But it's related to the public and people watching you roast. But I was actually, in addition to roasting and burning coffee, helping to manage the cafe that they had in the front. And we had some customers in the cafe. There was another guy roasting. He was training to burn coffee. And these customers wanted a quick tour. And so I said, sure, no problem. This guy roasting knew even less than I knew. And so he was, you know, questionable at best. But we walked through the doors with this couple who knew nothing about coffee, had never been in there, to take a look at the roastery. And we're looking right at the front of this UG22. That's smoky anyway, so you wouldn't know if there was a fire in there or not. But in this instance, there was definitely a fire in there. The roaster had no idea. He opened the door. See if you can picture us walking through, like, you know, doors that just kind of flip open. And he's opening the door to the roaster at that moment. And I just see a ball of fire in there, and it just goes out like that. We just turned right around. I pushed him back in, and I said, "Oh, not a good time for a tour, guys. We're going to do this later. Sorry." And they were all confused, had no idea what was going on. And then I ran back in to put out the fire. That was now on the cooling tray. So
Ooh.
bit of a mess. Yeah. But in that case, they also didn't know what was going on. The tourists, the people there for the tour, they didn't see a thing. Nobody got hurt. It was all fine. And I'm sure that UG22 over the years had seen many, many fires. And talk about a resilient machine. Talk about a machine that can take a beating.
Yeah. I mean, the mandate is burn it, and you did.
For years. For years. Those are all my fire stories, though. Those are really all my fire stories.
Joel, you have any fire stories?
Well,
Or general roaster stories?
you know, I've been racking my brain to come up with something that's funny, but most stories that happen in roasteries are actually terrifying and scary. And
You put out a fire for me, Joel. I don't know if you remember, but it was like my second day roasting, and I did something or other, and our production manager at the time, Kalina, came by, and she's like strolling. She's like, there's like flames coming out the side of your roaster. And it was like my second day. So, and she's like, is it supposed to do that? I've never seen that before. And I was like, no, help me.
At Ritual?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wow.
it wasn't as much of a fire in the roaster. The air fuel mixture on that, if it's off even slightly, the flame just does not go up into the drum, but out everywhere else. And it very much looks like you have a fire. It's kind of terrifying, especially on your second day. I could only blame myself for not telling you that this is a possibility if we do certain things together, which you found out. So that's
You were very, well, you know, trial by fire. We never did it again.
There you go. You know, it's funny, those like things that you learn as you go. I feel like when I first started roasting, my very first roasting job, like a super light roast for the Kenya, the nicest coffee in the house was second crack plus 30 seconds, like ultra light. And as I learned roasting, I kind of made every mistake out there. I think sometimes, you know, you're trying to lower the temperature in the drum, so you'll open the front door a little bit and let it cool off. Maybe you just happen to have a roast cooling in that cooling tray, and you decide, all right, it's that temperature, I'm going to load it right now. And it goes right through the drum into the cooling tray. I've done that at least 3 or 4 times. And once I had to hand sort about 80 pounds of coffee just it happens, but I've done that many times, which is unfortunate. I think the other thing, you know, going the other way, like maybe you have turned off the flame, you reach temperature, you charge your batch, and you forget to turn the flame on ever maybe, and you do this really long extended soak, the 5-minute soak, where you're like, it just isn't climbing the way I expected this roast to climb. That's also sometimes those mistakes, you cup them and it's, this is amazing. Something's going on here. We have to explore this more. So I don't regret all the mistakes I've made, but I've just made so many.
I think that's most of how you learn to be a good roaster.
Yeah.
Making mistakes. Yeah.
And then cupping it and see what happens. Like anytime I'm training roasters now, you know, I think there's like a crazy amount of pressure put on them to be perfect all the time. But coffee itself isn't perfect, and it's always changing and from bag to bag. So it's not, most of the time, it's not even the roaster's fault when coffees are tasting off. But I'm always like, you know, they're like, I did this, oh my God. And I'm like, okay, pull it aside, let's cup it. And who knows, it might be good or it might be really gross and
Terrible.
You're in trouble. But But yeah, I mean, I think I've all my greatest, like over the years of roasting, my mistakes have helped me not only be a better teacher, but also like helped with my own personal skills.
I
Yep.
love the attitude of experimentation. I think for me, the period in my roasting career that I grew the most was not the like 15 years where I did the exact same thing every day and cupped it and expected it to taste a certain way. It was this 2-year period where the roastery I worked for had a giant account that would be 10 to 12 batches of the same coffee. And I would always do one of the batches pretty different than the other 12 and blend it in so no one was the wiser. I would stretch out crack by 2 minutes. I would raise the intro. Each week I'd do something different and cut them next to just see what happened. And that period in my roasting career was like college. It was perfect. I learned so much more than the previous 15 or even 20. Yeah. So I appreciate it. Yeah.
Let
Wow.
me take a quick break from this and segue to the audience. If anyone has questions on roasting or for any of our panelists this week, please let us know. Kevin from C4 Supply Chain, I see your question, but it's a little bit off topic. I'll definitely answer it at the end of this session.
Oh, cool. Seaforth, Vancouver. Awesome.
Before Vancouver, yeah.
There we go. Yep.
How many total years have you all been roasting? From Gabby.
Hi, Gabby. I don't know now. 10? Checks out. I'm gonna go with 10.
There you go.
19.
19. Wow.
I think 17 or 16, maybe 16.
It's a whole lot of collective experience here
Mhm.
in our cyber room.
Yeah, I not unfortunately, but I mostly just sample roast now. I haven't been active roasting in a while, but I miss it a lot. I loved being a production roaster.
Yeah.
I do have a funny story regarding sample roasting that's very quick.
Please.
There was a period of time when I was working with coffee manufacturing where I was living in LA, and we didn't have an office or QC lab or anything. So I turned my kitchen into our QC lab, and I had a kawa. And the only place that I could roast was up against my kitchen window, which was really big, because that was the only way that all the smoke and everything would get sucked out. And my landlords lived nearby, so I was like really nervous about doing it in my house, and I didn't want to do it outside because they would be like, what is this weird contraption? So I was trying to be sneaky about it, but you know, there were periods of time where I'd have to roast literally all day because you can only do one at a time. So we lived in this small complex, and below us was our neighbor, Pierre, and he was like the nicest guy. He like immediately introduced himself to us, and you know, in San Francisco, like your neighbors don't do that. Like I've been living in my building for over a year now, and none of my neighbors talk to us, despite our best efforts. So we were like, wow, this is amazing. Like, what a nice fella. And like, he like welcomed us to the neighborhood and told us where to go. And it was really great. And he was always really cordial. And then like a couple months later, he started acting really strange to me. And I was like, oh my God, did I like leave my clothes in the dryer? Like, am I listening to music too loud? So I was like actively trying to change things because I was like, maybe he doesn't want to like talk to me about it. So I'll just try to figure out what it was. And finally I was outside one day and he came home and I was like, hey Pierre, like, I just want to check in and see if I'm like doing anything that's bothering you, or Charlie is, or is my music too loud? And mind you, he would listen to opera at like volume 180. And I was like, I'm actively not complaining about your opera. So like, maybe we can like find a happy medium. And he's like, I don't know what you're doing up there. And he's like, it smells like are you guys making drugs? And I was like, what? And he's like, it smells like you're cooking drugs. And I was like, what are you talking about? And I was like, oh, weird that you would associate that. I'm roasting coffee. And he was like, I don't think, no way. And I was like, yes way. And I like had to come bring my kawa down because it was going from my window straight into his. And, you know, evidently coffee smells like drugs. And so for months, he thought that Charlie and I like had like a meth lab in our apartment.
We had those problems in Peru when we first opened the office in Lima a few years ago, where all of the neighbors in the office thought like everything was on fire all the time. They were like,
Right.
and we were just roasting on ikawas, mind you. So like,
Yeah.
as smokeless as it's possible. And they
Right.
would come out into the hallway like, what's happening? It's like, all right, take it easy. Turn it
Yeah,
down.
totally.
Here, everybody, it's fine.
I would take fire over somebody assuming that I'm cooking drugs.
Yeah,
Fair enough.
definitely.
Oddly
Definitely.
enough, I actually made like a
Drugs.
toilet paper roll with like I made like a toilet paper roll with like a fabric softener sheet and tied it on for my ikawa when I am roasting at my house.
Smart.
Just, you know, it was great.
Yeah, I thought I was being
Yeah.
slick, but I was not.
But a lot less smoke on the Ikawa, right? Just because of the 50 gram charge. I like that about it. It's like you can almost get away with roasting indoors without any ventilation or very little.
You
It actually
could, yeah.
works
I think we
quite
do it all
well.
the time. Yeah.
That
Yeah,
dry
I do it
heat.
all the time.
This roast, you know?
Yeah.
One of my pet peeves about my house is when they redid the kitchen before we bought it, they didn't vent out the hood. They blocked that off. And I moved in and I cook a lot and it just gets, you know, smoky in here. So finally, after 5 years of living here, about 2 months ago, I got up there, cut a hole in the ceiling, found the old ductwork and connected it. And now when I got my Ikawa out, it goes right on the stove, right under the vent, and it's perfect. No smoke at all. Love
Yeah.
it.
Easy.
Yep.
Easy. A kitchen fan, definitely. A kitchen hood will win
It's
that
a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. Yeah. You know,